Today we have a hand featuring Brad Owen, the poker video blogging king. Also, he's becoming a bit of a cash game crusher recently. Today we're playing 10, 20, 40. No limit, Texas Hold'em at Bellagio. Let's get right to it.
We're still playing the second stand-up game. 3 players limp in from under the gun +1, the button, and the big blind. I check. We're going 4 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out 8-3 deuce with 2 clubs. We've got a flush draw with a backdoor straight possibility. The big blind bets 400.
Ooh, all right. First things first, why in the world is this guy standing up? I'll tell you why. They are playing what's referred to as a stand-up game, where when you win a pot, you sit down, and the last person standing has to pay everyone at the table some amount of money, usually a few big blinds. Currently, Brad is also standing up. All right, flop comes 8, 3, 2, 2 clubs. Big blind leads $400, 2x pot. It is worth noting we are playing about 200 something big blinds deep, so very deep stacked in the situation, and the pot's relatively small. If there's ever a time to be blasting the flop, it's quite often when you're playing very deep stacked. So the opponent does go quite big. I think this is going to be somewhat polarized to good draws and good made hands. Maybe made hands that are almost always good but vulnerable, like an 8. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. So facing this big bet in position, playing deep stacked with the 10 high flush draw, I think calling's really the only option because you block a lot of the obvious flush draws that your opponent could have, which means they're more likely to have an 8. And unless you think they're going to start folding out an 8 or 2 pair, which, I don't think they have a lot of 2 pair, but if they do have 2 pair, do you think they're really going to fold it to a raise? I don't think so. So this is a situation where I think calling is the only option, even against a very, very big bet. A lot of people look at this big bet and think, oh my God, I'm not getting very good pot odds. I guess I have to fold. We have to realize, deep stacked, in position, you are going to be able to make this pot gigantic when you do happen to make a flush.
It's over 2 times the size of the pot. I haven't played much with this guy. I'm not sure if you bet into everyone with a strong hand or go for a check raise. I have 2 players behind me, could have connected on this flop since it's a limp pot and a low board. I don't hate folding. After all, we don't even have that strong of a draw. In the corner of my eye, I see Troy reaching for raising chips while I'm still considering several options. Usually Troy's tactic of out-of-turn chip assembling is used to intimidate the person whose turn it is so that they may fold. I'm pretty sure that everyone at the table sees what Troy is doing. I call the 400 because I'm not intimidated, but perhaps to others, it'll look like I'm calling with hopes of putting in a back raise if Troy indeed follows through with a raise himself.
So that's interesting. So it is worth noting, as there are more and more players yet to act behind you, you should be way more inclined to fold your non-premium draws because your opponents yet to act could easily have ace-high flush draw or king-high flush draw, right? If this was a heads-up pot, I would definitely call. As it gets more and more multi-way, you should be more inclined to fold. And I do think that with 2 other players yet to act, folding's probably reasonable, may even be best. Whatever. Now, Brad also said the opponent does this thing where they start to stack up chips as almost like a strategy to induce Brad to fold or call and not raise, which means that usually that opponent's going to have something that's good but not great. And they would rather the pot just be heads up, of course. So if you know your opponent does that to try to make you overfold, the answer is then do not overfold. And whenever you do play live poker, especially if you play with the same players on a regular basis, you will pick up reads like this. And quite often they're going to be super reliable unless you tell everybody on a video blog that they do it. All right, let's see how this goes.
Troy doesn't like that I called. He folds. It seems my read was correct. The button folds. It's down to heads up. The turn is the queen of hearts. We don't hit. The big blind may be concerned that we have a monster. He checks. My call on the flop with 2 players behind me, while one of them was at least trying to make it seem as if he was going to raise, should have looked incredibly strong. I'd like to play into that perception by betting 700 as a semi-bluff.
I love betting here. This is a spot where if your opponent did have an 8 or a 3 or a 2, they probably didn't connect with the queen. And while we also don't have a whole lot of queens in position, we could easily have sets in this scenario, right? So this is a spot where we definitely want to put in a chunky bet with our hands that are almost always good but vulnerable, like whatever queens we have, our best 8s probably even. And also we want to be betting with a lot of high equity draws that lack showdown value, exactly like this hand. So I love this bet. We do want to go big so that we can really polarize our strategy on the river.
If we can get the opponent to fold a hand like an 8, or maybe even a better flush draw, that'd be huge for us.
No one's going to fold a better flush draw.
Even if the opponent calls, it's not terrible. We can possibly still hit a club to win. The big blind calls, we can pretty much rule out him having 2 pair of betters since he didn't bet turn himself or check raises.
Definitely agree with that.
The vast majority of the time, the opponent will have 1 pair or worse. The river is the king of diamonds, we've officially bricked, and have no showdown value. The big blind checks. If he had a pair of 8s on the flop and didn't improve, he's going to hate the run out. If he had the ace or jack high flush draw, he won't like it either.
All right. I want you all to be very honest with me and very honest with yourself. In this scenario, what would you do in Brad's shoes? Pot's 2,400. We're playing very deep stack. We have $9,000 left. In the spot, would you just check it and give it up? Would you bet something like $600? Would you bet something like $1,400? Would you pot it? Or would you maybe even go for an overpot? And if so, how much? Take a second, think about it. Maybe even pause the video and write what you would do in the comment section below. This is a interesting one because what does the opponent actually have most of the time? And what do I actually have most of the time? This is a spot where Brad, I think, is going to have a whole lot of random kings and a whole lot of random queens. So given he's going to have a whole lot of random kings and queens, probably flush draws that now made top pair, middle pair, this is a pretty good spot to go for a value bet. And those hands mostly do not want to go for a big value bet. They want to go for a medium value bet, or at least a non-gigantic value bet. Typically when you overpot it, you're saying I either have like 2 pair and better, or I have total garbage, right? And the thing is that I don't actually think Brad has a whole lot of 2 pair or better in his range. He does have some, but not a ton. So I think most of our bets in the situation we do bet are going to be for something like pot or 60% pot or 70% pot, something like that. Because we're going to be going for value clearly with a hand like a king or a queen. But I think if we start going over the size of the pot, we're going to have a difficult time getting called. That said, we do still have some overbets in our range, so maybe this is a reasonable hand to go for the overbet with. You may ask, should we ever bet small, like $600? I think absolutely not. If you bet 600 and 8's never folding. There also is a lot of merit to the idea that I just want to bet gigantic here because I'm really trying to get an 8 or 3 or a 2 to fold, and an 8, a 3, or 2 may call a small bet or a medium bet or maybe even a pot size bet, but I think they're going to fold to an overbet every time. This is a situation, especially in live poker, where you know everybody in your game mostly only overbets with the nuts, and your opponent really doesn't like to call overbets. Just overbet with all your bluffs and bet smaller, like pot or a little bit less than pot with all your value hands. That way all your bluffs get through and all your value bets get called, and then life's easy and you pocket a ton of money. But this is a situation where I have to presume you want to go for a big bet in the spot, especially given the read the opponent probably has a whole lot of marginal made hands. So I like a big bet in this scenario, like pot or even over pot.
I continue with our story that we've got a monster by betting 3,000.
Nice.
There are plenty of value hands that I could be doing this with, including 2 pair and set combos. As long as the big blind didn't river top pair with a hand like King X of clubs, we probably have a great chance of getting this through. The big blind is a very good high stakes player. He's taken his time to think about it. Over a minute goes by, and he still hasn't made a decision. I'm doing my best not to give anything away. I don't get the sense that he's strong. It seems like he's debating whether or not to fold. In my head, I'm rooting extremely hard for him to lay it down, otherwise we'll be stuck over $5,000 only an hour into the session. After a minute and 45 seconds that feels like 3 hours, the big blind calls and crushes me. It hurts to get caught again. We show the bluff. The opponent reveals that he made a hero call with Jack 8 offsuit. He wins an $8,000 pot with third pair. I have to give him credit. If he played his cards face up on the river, I probably would have made the same play and expected to fold nearly 100% of the time. Instead, I get destroyed.
Instead, I just get destroyed. What do we think about this call with a Jack 8? I actually think this is probably a pretty good hand to call with. Whenever you're looking to find hero calls against good players who are willing to bluff, you want to make sure you do not block the logical bluffs. What are logical bluffs on this board containing a king, a queen, an 8, a 3, and a 2? Well, Brad's going to have a lot of straight draws, right? You really do not want to block a 6, a 5, or a 4. He's also going to have a lot of flush draws, so you really do not want to have a club. And notice here, the opponent has Jack of spades, 8 of hearts, which does not block the flushes and does not block the straight draws. I think this is actually an excellent hand to call with in this exact scenario. If he had a Jack of clubs and an 8, it becomes way closer to a fold. If he had a Jack with like a 4, Jack 4 offsuit, with a club, definitely a hand you want to fold. But I think this particular hand, Jack 4 offsuit, never mind, Jack 4 offsuit's Jack high. I meant 8-4. 8-4, there you go. Got Jack 4 on the brain apparently for some reason. I don't know why. If he had a hand like 8-4 with the 8 of clubs, or with the 8 of clubs or the 4 of clubs, it'd be way closer to a fold. So this is a spot where when you don't have a club, you should be more inclined to call. And when you don't block the straight draws, you should be more inclined to call. And, well, this Jack 8 does it. The opponent made a big call, and he crushes Brad's soul. tough luck. That's gonna be it today. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe buttons down below. Click the notification bell. Also, thanks to Poker News for hosting this video. Thanks to Brad Owen for letting me use this content. Make sure you check out everything that they all put out. They all do a good job and amazing work, and I'm thankful for all of them. Good luck in your games, have fun, and I hope all of your overbet river bluffs get through.